The courthouse smelled of stale coffee and polished wood. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as people murmured, shuffled, and tapped their feet impatiently against the marble floors. Detective Mason Hart stood rigid in his navy blue uniform, his polished boots tapping lightly against the ground. Beside him, Coda, his German Shepherd partner, a 4-year-old professional trained to detect fear, drugs, explosives, and aggression, stood perfectly still. The dog's ears twitched slightly, sensing the tension around them, yet his body remained composed, disciplined. It was a normal Wednesday morning for Mason, at least in his mind, but the stakes had never felt higher. The custody case he was involved in wasn't just any family dispute. It had become a twisted, multi-layered nightmare of alleged child neglect, domestic violence, and missing evidence. Every eye in the courthouse seemed to be watching, waiting for someone to make a mistake, and Mason knew the entire room could explode at any misstep. He exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the premonition of unease that had settled in his chest. Then he heard the faint sound of small footsteps, barely audible over the murmuring crowd. Mason turned slightly, thinking it might be one of the staff children accompanying their parents, but as his eyes scanned the lobby, he froze. There, moving in sudden, unpredictable bursts, was a little girl. Her hair, golden and curly, bounced as she ran. She wore a faded pink sweater and jeans that had clearly been patched one too many times. She looked impossibly small against the looming figures of lawyers, officers, and court personnel. This was Ellie Carson, 3 years old, and she was moving straight toward him and Coda. Mason's hand instinctively went to Coda's collar. "Coda, stay," he said firmly. The dog's ears perked, but he remained still. He trusted Mason implicitly, but even the most disciplined dog could sense the danger in the air. Ellie's small finger rose slowly, pointing directly at Coda. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, held a depth of fear and clarity that seemed almost impossible for a child her age. The chatter in the lobby faded as if someone had muted the world. Then she whispered 2 words, so simple, so small, yet filled with a weight that no adult voice had managed in the room all morning. "Bad dog." The words hung in the air like a thick fog. Everyone stopped moving. Lawyers froze mid-step, clerks dropped their pens, and the security guard at the metal detector leaned forward instinctively. Mason felt a chill run down his spine. But what happened next made him question everything he thought he knew about Coda. The dog lowered his massive head, his tail stiffening in a position Mason had never seen before. His nostrils flared, taking in the child's scent. He inched backward a step, ears flattened slightly. A low, almost imperceptible whine escaped his throat. Coda, the dog who had faced aggressive suspects, armed criminals and snarling street dogs without flinching, was uneasy. Mason's heartbeat accelerated. "Ellie," a shaky voice came from behind him. Mason turned to see the little girl's grandmother, Mrs. Helen Carson, rushing forward. Her hands trembled as she scooped the child into her arms. "Ellie, honey, come back, don't." But Mason's eyes stayed locked on the girl. Her expression was too precise, too deliberate for a 3-year-old. She wasn't running on whimsy or curiosity, she was warning someone. He bent slightly toward the child, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, has Ellie ever met this dog before?" Helen Carson shook her head vigorously. "No, never. She's scared of dogs since." Her voice caught and she trailed off. Mason felt a cold prickle of realization. Whatever had scared Ellie in her past, it had left a mark deep enough that Coda's mere presence, and more importantly, the child's recognition of something in him, had triggered it. The lobby remained still. Whispers began spreading like wildfire among the people gathered. Did she just say, "bad dog"? Coda whined again, more audibly this time. Mason could feel the tension radiating off him. He reached down, resting a steadying hand on the dog's neck, trying to convey calm. "You okay, boy?" he murmured, more to himself than to the dog. Mason's mind raced. This wasn't a simple custody hearing. Something about this child, her reaction, and this dog's response, something hidden, was about to erupt. Helen Carson's face was pale, her lips trembling. She hugged Ellie tightly to her chest. She saw what happened. I don't know why she said that now. Mason's instincts flared. In his 20 years on the force, he had learned to trust Coda's reactions more than anyone's testimony. The dog's unease was never wrong. And now he was witnessing a child pointing and whispering words that carried the kind of weight adults spend years trying to articulate. The whispers in the lobby turned into full-blown murmurs. A lawyer tugged at his jacket, trying to get the child away from the dog. "She's disturbing the proceedings. Someone take her." But Helen's grip tightened. She shook her head. "No, she's telling the truth, I think. I just don't understand it." Mason looked around. Cameras clicked in the distance. People began pulling out phones, recording the extraordinary scene unfolding. Even the security guard had stopped mid-step, frozen in disbelief. Coda stepped back slightly, keeping his eyes locked on the child. It was an alert stance, not aggressive, but something primal, instinctual, and warning was in his posture. Mason could feel it in his bones. Something had happened, something serious, and only Ellie and this dog knew the truth right now. Then Ellie did something that sent the entire lobby into stunned silence. She leaned forward slightly in her grandmother's arms, her tiny face serious beyond comprehension. Her lips barely moved as she repeated her two words, louder this time. "Bad dog." And the low growl that escaped Coda's throat confirmed Mason's worst fears. This wasn't fear of a stranger or confusion. It was recognition of danger, a warning he had never heard in his career. Mason's pulse raced. This child, no more than 3 years old, had said two words that immediately triggered the instincts of a professional K-9 trained to handle life-threatening situations. And the dog had reacted in a way he never had before. "What happened to you, Ellie?" Mason murmured softly, kneeling down to her level. The child clutched her grandmother tighter, her wide eyes darting nervously between Mason and the dog, as if expecting some invisible force to leap out at them. Helen Carson whispered, her voice shaking. She was there that night. She saw him, the neighbor's dog, attack. She barely made it out alive. Mason's stomach turned. He had heard of children traumatized by dogs before, but this was something else entirely. The magnitude of her trauma, combined with Coda's reaction, meant that a chain of events was unfolding that no one in the lobby could predict. As the courtroom doors opened and a clerk began calling the first case, Mason knew this was just the beginning. The room had gone quiet in anticipation. Every eye followed Ellie, every ear strained to hear her next word, every hand unconsciously reached for a phone. Mason straightened and whispered to Coda, "Stay close. We're going to find out what's really going on here." But Coda didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Ellie, ears twitching, low growls still vibrating in his chest, a signal that danger, far more intricate and sinister than a custody dispute, was about to surface. And Ellie, barely able to speak more than a few words, had unknowingly triggered a storm that no one in that courthouse would ever forget. The air was thick with tension. The murmurs of the lobby were replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. People didn't move. They didn't blink. All anyone could do was watch the small child and the massive, disciplined police dog in a moment that would change everything. Because in that frozen instant, Mason knew something had been set in motion that would shake the foundations of the case, the courthouse, and the life of little Ellie Carson forever. And no one could guess what would happen next. The courtroom was just down the hall, its tall wooden doors echoing with the whispers of staff, lawyers, and spectators as they shuffled in. Mason Hart led Coda through the narrow corridor, the dog's powerful frame brushing against the walls with each step. Every footstep seemed amplified, every creak of the floorboards louder than usual. Mason's heart still thumped from what had just happened in the lobby, and a cold tension had settled in his chest. Coda had been trained to handle chaos. Firearms, no problem, screaming suspects, unfazed, explosives, a mere distraction. But the way he had reacted to Ellie, it was like he had smelled something he couldn't quite name, sensed something beyond the ordinary, beyond logic. His low growl still vibrated in the air like a warning. Mason had never heard it before, not even in the field. As they approached the courtroom, Mason noticed Ellie had calmed slightly, pressed against her grandmother's chest, but her gaze remained sharp, intense, and unnervingly mature for a child of 3. She hadn't looked around at the crowd, hadn't smiled or giggled as children her age might. She had come here with a purpose, though no adult in the room could yet understand what it was. The judge, Rourke, a stern man in his 60s with a reputation for intuition as sharp as his gavel, was already seated. His eyes flicked toward Mason and Coda the moment they entered. Mason's stomach tightened. He knew the judge could sense something unusual as well. Rourke had presided over hundreds of cases in his decades on the bench, but he had learned to recognize when the air in a courtroom shifted in ways no one could fully explain. Coda sat at Mason's side as instructed, ears twitching, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. But unlike his usual composed demeanor, today he was unsettled. He kept shifting his weight from paw to paw, a low rumble emanating from deep in his chest. Mason's fingers twitched, itching to reassure the dog, but he knew better than to interfere with instincts that had been honed over years of rigorous training. "Detective Hart," Judge Rourke said, voice calm but commanding. "We are here for a custody hearing. You will provide your testimony regarding the child, Ms. Carson, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mason replied, keeping his voice steady, but his mind was racing. He could not ignore the child's reaction, nor the subtle, unexplainable tension radiating from Coda. Ellie sat perched on her grandmother's lap, tiny hands gripping the pink fabric of her sweater. She was silent, eyes darting between the judge, Mason, and the dog. Every so often, her little finger twitched, pointing almost imperceptibly. Mason felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Your Honor," Mason began, choosing his words carefully, "I need to report something unusual before I proceed with standard testimony." Judge Rourke's brow furrowed. "Proceed." Mason swallowed hard. The child, she reacted to Coda in a way that is unprecedented. She pointed, she spoke, she said, and I quote, "Bad dog." Coda, my dog, reacted with extreme alertness. He has never ever reacted this way in training or the field. The courtroom murmured. The whispers spread like wildfire. "Bad dog." The detective's dog reacted. Judge Rourke leaned forward. "Extreme alertness. Elaborate." Mason glanced down at Coda. The dog's nostrils flared, head low, tail stiff. He was signaling something, and Mason didn't yet understand what. He exhibited a full alert stance, Your Honor. Low growl, ears flat, and tense muscles. Coda only behaves this way when he senses real, immediate danger or trauma connected to someone. This is not fear of a stranger. He's never been afraid. But he is unsettled by the child's presence in a very specific, non-random way. The judge's eyes narrowed. He was a man who rarely displayed surprise, but there was a flicker of intrigue in his gaze. "And you believe this is relevant to the case?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mason said, his voice unwavering now. "Because this child's reaction and Coda's response indicate a prior traumatic experience linked to dogs or potentially an individual associated with the child's trauma. I strongly suspect the child may be withholding or unable to articulate key information about a prior incident." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the lawyers exchanged nervous glances. No one had expected a 3-year-old's interaction with a police dog to become the focal point of a custody dispute, yet here it was, raw, immediate, and unsettling. Ellie's grandmother swallowed hard. "Detective Hart is correct," she whispered, gripping Ellie's tiny frame. "Ellie, she saw something bad. I didn't think she'd remember. I didn't think she'd react this way in public." Judge Rourke tapped his gavel lightly, as if to punctuate the gravity of the moment. "Ms. Carson, please explain." Helen's voice quivered. It's difficult. Her father had a dog, a very aggressive dog. It attacked a neighbor once. Ellie, she witnessed it. She hasn't spoken about it properly. I thought she'd forgotten. But when she saw Coda, it triggered something. I don't know what exactly. Mason felt a cold dread settle over him. Whatever Ellie had witnessed, whatever trauma she carried, it had surfaced with a clarity that shocked even experienced officers. And Coda's reaction, his disciplined, unflinching response to danger, was proof that this wasn't just a child's imagination. The judge leaned back, his sharp eyes on Mason. "Detective, are you suggesting that the child may be a key witness to an incident previously unknown to law enforcement?" Mason nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe she may be able to identify someone or something related to her trauma, but she needs guidance. The child herself is not dangerous, but she holds knowledge we may have overlooked, and Coda's behavior confirms that this is not ordinary." Coda's growl deepened slightly, echoing through the courtroom. Some of the spectators flinched instinctively, as if they could feel the tension radiating from the dog. Mason could feel the gaze of everyone in the room, the weight of their attention pressing down like a physical force. Judge Rourke's gaze shifted to Ellie. She sat rigid in her grandmother's lap, wide eyes locked on the dog, tiny hands pressed tightly against the fabric of her sweater. For a moment, the courtroom felt suspended in time. "Ellie," the judge said softly, leaning forward, "do you know what this dog is telling us?" The child's lips quivered. She didn't answer immediately. She only blinked slowly, then pointed at Coda again, whispering the same two words, almost as if confirming them for everyone to hear. "Bad dog." A shiver ran through Mason. This was no coincidence. This child, in the quietest, smallest way, had set in motion a chain of events that could uncover truths far beyond a simple custody dispute. Coda suddenly stiffened again, head low, tail rigid. He began to circle slowly, keeping Ellie within his line of sight. Mason instinctively followed, careful not to interfere but sensing that the dog had detected a trace, a memory, something invisible to the rest of the room. Helen Carson's face had gone pale. I think she remembers more than she can say," she whispered, clutching her granddaughter. The judge leaned forward, his voice dropping, commanding attention despite the gentle tone. "Detective Hart, you will remain with the child and the dog. Anyone attempting to disrupt this process will be removed. I want a full report on your observations immediately." Mason nodded, tension coiling in his chest like a spring. He looked down at Coda. "Stay close, buddy," he whispered. The dog's low growl softened slightly, but his gaze never left the child. As the session progressed, Mason watched Ellie carefully. Her eyes darted occasionally to the courtroom doors, her tiny hands twitching toward her backpack, toward a stuffed animal peeking from inside. Mason's instincts screamed at him. That toy, there was something about it. Coda seemed to sense it too. The murmurs in the courtroom grew, as staff whispered about the strange interaction. Lawyers were already wondering how a toddler's words could impact a legal proceeding. But Mason's mind raced ahead. This wasn't about custody anymore. Something far deeper, far darker, had been awakened by two simple words. "Bad dog." And as the gavel struck to begin the official testimony, Mason realized that Coda's disciplined instincts and this little girl's fragmented memories were about to collide. And no one in the room, not even the judge, could predict the consequences. A storm had begun, and it was only just starting. The courtroom had quieted to an almost unnatural stillness. Mason Hart remained near the entrance, Coda at his side, eyes scanning every movement, every subtle shift in the room. Ellie sat on her grandmother's lap, her small body rigid, as if bracing for something she already knew was coming. Judge Rourke leaned back in his high-backed chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His sharp eyes, usually hidden behind wire-rimmed glasses, flicked toward Mason and Coda repeatedly, absorbing every detail. The judge had seen countless cases in his decades on the bench, but the tension radiating from this small girl and a police dog was unlike anything he'd witnessed. Something about their interaction suggested hidden truths far deeper than the custody dispute before him. Rourke reached for the case file in front of him. His finger traced down a page labeled Exhibit 4, Photographic Evidence. He paused, lifting a photograph toward the light. The image showed a living room dimly lit. A young girl no older than Ellie sat on a worn couch clutching a stuffed animal. Her golden curls hung in disarray around her pale face, but it was her eyes that froze the judge mid-breath. They were hollow, distant, eyes that had witnessed more than they should ever have had to. He leaned closer, squinting. There was a faint shadow in the background, blurred but menacing. A large dog, partially obscured by the corner of a sofa. The child's expression wasn't merely fear. It was terror, deep and consuming, like the terror of someone who had seen a world collapse in a single instant. Judge Rourke's brow furrowed. Something about the photo felt alive, like it was radiating a hidden message. He tapped it lightly with his finger. "Detective Hart," he said, voice calm but heavy, "you are trained to read signs. What do you make of this?" Mason approached cautiously. He examined the photograph, his eyes narrowing. "Your Honor, this child's posture, the way she's gripping the toy, the tension in her shoulders, it all screams trauma. And that dog in the background, that's not a harmless family pet. That's an animal conditioned to intimidate, possibly attack. I've seen similar situations in abuse investigations. This child," he swallowed, his voice catching slightly, "she's not just a witness, she's a survivor, and she's remembering." The courtroom shifted uneasily. Lawyers leaned forward, whispering to one another. A few spectators tried to peer over shoulders, straining to catch glimpses of the photograph. But it wasn't the image itself that made them uncomfortable. It was the sense of a story untold, a danger unseen yet somehow present. Judge Rourke's gaze returned to Ellie. She had tilted her head slightly, eyes wide, fingers clinging to the stuffed animal peeking from her backpack. Mason noticed it first, the way Coda's ears twitched, the subtle stiffening of his stance, his nose pointing ever so slightly in the child's direction. He realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the dog's reaction wasn't random. Coda was reacting to something hidden in plain sight, something the humans in the courtroom could not perceive. The judge's voice cut through Mason's thoughts. "Detective, you say she is remembering, but what does that mean? Can she identify the individual, or are we talking about a general memory of fear?" Mason hesitated. How could he explain a child's fractured memory? How could he convey that Coda, a creature trained to detect danger with unerring accuracy, had just reacted to what could be described as nothing, yet somehow everything? "Your Honor," Mason said finally, "this child has experienced an event that has left her in partial silence for months. She does not speak about it freely. But Coda," he gestured toward the dog, who had now stepped closer to Ellie, gaze fixed, tail stiff. "Coda reacted to her in a way that indicates recognition of trauma. That recognition does not come from fear of a stranger. It comes from familiarity. Something she has seen, felt, or endured, and Coda's instincts have picked up on it." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "So the dog senses something the child cannot yet verbalize." Mason nodded. "Exactly. And when she pointed at Coda and said bad dog in the lobby, it wasn't childish imagination. It was a warning. It was her memory speaking through a lens she understands, the only way she can communicate it." The courtroom murmured again. The tension was electric. Even Helen Carson, usually composed under stress, had begun trembling. She hugged Ellie tightly, rocking her slightly, whispering soothing words that did little to mask her own anxiety. Judge Rourke tapped his gavel lightly. "Detective Hart, this is unusual, but I will allow you to continue your observations. This child's trauma and the interaction with your K9 may be relevant to the case. Proceed carefully, but proceed." Mason exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Ellie's trauma wasn't just a legal issue, it was a matter of life and safety. And if he was right, Coda's instincts were about to lead them to revelations that no one could have anticipated. He knelt beside Ellie, careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. "Ellie," he said softly, voice low, "can you show me what you're thinking? You don't have to talk if it's hard, just show me." Ellie's tiny hand twitched toward her backpack, then hesitated. Her lips parted slightly, forming words she couldn't yet fully articulate. Mason followed her gaze to the stuffed animal she clutched. Coda's head snapped toward the same toy, nose flaring as he detected a faint but distinct scent, something hidden inside, something that screamed trauma, abuse, and fear. Mason's pulse raced. He had trained for countless scenarios, from armed standoffs to kidnapping investigations. But nothing had prepared him for the sudden clarity that Ellie's small gestures combined with Coda's instincts could provide. The judge leaned forward again. "Detective, what is he sensing? Can you explain?" Mason's voice was steady, but inside his mind raced. "Your Honor, I don't yet know, but whatever it is significant. Coda only reacts like this when there is a connection to a traumatic or dangerous event. And Ellie, she is the link." Helen Carson clutched her granddaughter tighter. "Detective, she's been having nightmares. Sometimes she talks in her sleep. She says things like the bad dog knows." A ripple of shock passed through the courtroom. The judge's eyes widened slightly. "The child speaks." Helen nodded, her voice trembling. "Not much, but she knows something we don't. I think she's trying to tell us." Mason felt his stomach tighten. This was no longer just about custody. This was about uncovering a hidden truth, something the adults in the room had overlooked, dismissed, or simply not seen. And Ellie, in her small, fragmented way, was trying to guide them. He glanced down at Coda. The dog had lowered himself slightly, body tense, gaze locked on the stuffed animal. Mason could feel the energy, the unspoken communication between dog and child, building into something tangible. Judge Rourke leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly. "Detective Hart, this is highly irregular, but I trust your judgment. Proceed carefully. Document everything. The child's reactions, the dog's behavior, it may be the key to understanding what happened in her past." Mason nodded, though he felt a knot of dread in his chest. He had a growing suspicion that what Ellie was remembering, or trying to communicate, was far darker than any of them could imagine. As the courtroom session continued, Mason observed the child closely. She did not look around at the room. She did not acknowledge the spectators or the lawyers. Instead, she focused on the toy in her lap and the invisible connection it seemed to hold to the past. Coda's low growl deepened. His entire body coiled like a spring ready to react. Mason's instincts screamed at him that something was about to surface, a truth hidden in plain sight, a secret long buried, and a danger no one yet understood. The judge's voice interrupted Mason's thoughts. "Detective, you may approach the child and examine the toy if you believe it is safe and necessary." Mason hesitated only a moment. He slowly moved closer, careful not to startle Ellie or Coda. The dog followed, still alert, low growl vibrating in his chest. Mason knelt beside Ellie's backpack, gently touching the edge of the zipper. The child's small hand twitched again, guiding him almost imperceptibly. Mason's pulse quickened. Coda stiffened beside him, signaling that the moment was critical. He unzipped the backpack, revealing the stuffed animal fully. The moment it came into view, Coda's growl shifted into an intense, alert bark, sharp, insistent, and unrelenting. Mason froze. Inside the toy was something hidden, something Ellie had carried unknowingly, something that had survived the past months unnoticed by everyone. And in that instant, Mason realized, this child wasn't just a witness to trauma. She was a guardian of evidence that no adult had yet discovered. The courtroom leaned forward. Every whisper, every gasp, every camera flash fell away. All that remained was Ellie, the toy, and Coda, a silent triangle holding a truth that would soon unravel everything in ways no one was prepared for. Mason swallowed hard, glancing at Judge Rourke. "Your Honor, I think we found something that changes everything." The judge's eyes narrowed, pulse quickening subtly. "Proceed, detective, but be careful, whatever this is, it is far more important than anyone in this courtroom realizes." And in that moment, Ellie's small voice, barely a whisper, trembled through the room. "It's inside." The courtroom froze. The hush was absolute. No one could predict what was about to emerge next. The hush that fell over the courtroom after Ellie's tiny whisper, "It's inside," was suffocating. Lawyers stopped mid-note, spectators froze with phones in hand, and even the judge leaned forward, gripping the arms of his chair, his sharp eyes locked on the girl. Mason Hart knelt by Ellie's side, careful not to startle her. Coda, usually stoic, sat tense beside her, eyes darting between the stuffed animal and Mason, growl vibrating low in his chest, a signal of something dark, familiar, and dangerous. Every instinct in Mason's body screamed that what Ellie was about to reveal wasn't just a fragment of memory. It was a clue to something far more sinister. Helen Carson, Ellie's grandmother, swallowed hard. Her hands shook as she smoothed the child's curly hair. "Ellie, you have to tell them what you know," she whispered, voice breaking. "It's not your fault, we just need to know." The child's tiny lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might retreat back into silence, the familiar fortress she had built around herself. But then, almost imperceptibly, her finger moved. Not at Coda this time, not at the toy, but toward the courtroom itself, as though the invisible memories she held spanned the room like threads only she could see. Judge Rourke's voice was calm but insistent. "Ellie, can you tell us what you mean by bad dog? What are you trying to show us?" Ellie's voice came out as a fragile whisper, so soft most people barely heard it. "Hurt him." The words were simple, they shouldn't have carried any weight, but the air in the courtroom shifted instantly, heavy with unspoken dread. Mason felt it in his chest like a physical punch. Coda's growl deepened, reverberating through the room, eyes never leaving Ellie or the toy she clutched. Helen Carson's hands tightened around her granddaughter. "It was her father, he had a dog," she said, voice barely audible. "A big one, aggressive. Ellie, she was there the night it attacked. She's been silent since that night. She hasn't spoken about it because she's scared it will come back, the memory." Mason's stomach twisted. He had handled countless cases involving child witnesses, but nothing prepared him for the raw clarity of a child, this young, revealing fragments of trauma that had remained hidden for months. Judge Rourke's eyes sharpened. "Ms. Carson, can you explain? Was the child physically harmed?" Helen swallowed hard. Not physically, thank God, but emotionally, yes. She saw things no 3-year-old should ever see. The dog, her father, there was violence. She barely survived the night. I thought she forgot. I thought we were safe. Mason's instincts flared. He leaned down, voice low and careful. "Ellie, the dog you saw today, Coda, is different. He won't hurt you, but he's reacting to something you remember. Can you show me what you mean?" Ellie's small hand twitched toward her backpack. Mason noticed the stuffed toy peeking out, its worn fabric unassuming, yet somehow containing the intensity of her memories. Coda's low growl sharpened again, and Mason realized the dog's instincts had never been wrong. Whatever Ellie had survived, whatever she remembered, it was somehow encoded in the toy she clutched like a shield. The courtroom murmured, whispers rippling through the rows. Lawyers leaned in, spectators held their breath, but no one moved. Even the judge seemed suspended in the tension, aware that a small child and a police dog were revealing something far beyond the ordinary scope of legal proceedings. Helen Carson's voice trembled as she added more details. "Ellie, she's been having nightmares. Sometimes she mutters things, small phrases like, 'the bad dog knows.' She hasn't been able to explain, but I think she's trying to tell us what happened." Mason felt the weight of the revelation settle over him. This was more than a custody dispute. Ellie's memories, fragmented and silent for months, had just resurfaced in a way that demanded action. The dog's reaction confirmed it, and Mason could feel the gears of investigation beginning to turn. This case was no longer about custody. It was about uncovering a hidden crime, and the child was the only witness capable of pointing the way. Judge Rourke tapped his gavel lightly, breaking the silence. "Detective Hart, I want you to examine this toy carefully. The child's memories, combined with your K9's reaction, may be the key to understanding the events she cannot yet articulate." Mason nodded, swallowing hard. He moved closer to the backpack, glancing at Coda. The dog's muscles were taut, eyes fixed on the toy, low growl vibrating as though it contained the secrets of that fateful night. Mason unzipped the backpack slowly, careful not to startle Ellie or the dog. The stuffed animal fell into his hands, and Coda immediately stiffened. His sniffing became rapid, his growl rising into a low bark. Mason's pulse raced. He could feel the intensity of the dog's instincts, a silent alarm that signaled danger, trauma, and something buried inside the toy. He carefully inspected the toy, gently pressing on its seams, and felt a small, hard lump inside. Mason's hands shook slightly as he realized what it was. Something had been hidden inside the toy, deliberately placed, a secret the child had unknowingly carried for months. Helen Carson gasped. "Detective, be careful, it belonged to him." Mason nodded, heart pounding. With precise care, he opened the seam, revealing a tiny capsule, aged and worn, yet intact. Inside, a folded piece of paper rested, stained and fragile. Mason's eyes widened as he carefully unfolded it. The first line made him freeze. "If you're reading this, he knows I'm gone." Murmurs swept through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Detective Hart, what does this mean?" Mason's voice was steady, though his mind raced. "Your Honor, this note appears to be from the child's mother. She had been missing for months, assumed to have fled due to domestic issues. But this suggests otherwise. It describes fear, coercion, and threats, and the instructions indicate that items the child carries, the toys, contain evidence." The courtroom erupted quietly. Lawyers whispered urgently among themselves. Spectators shifted uneasily in their seats. Helen Carson hugged Ellie tightly, tears running down her cheeks. She's been holding this for months," Helen whispered. Coda's low growl softened slightly, his alert posture remaining, as though he understood the magnitude of the discovery. Mason looked down at Ellie. She sat perfectly still, her small fingers touching the toy, eyes wide, as if she had known all along that it contained the secret. Judge Rourke's gaze sharpened, his gavel hovering. "Detective, this changes the scope of the case. Immediate action is required. I want a full investigation into the mother's disappearance and the items hidden with the child, and I want custody proceedings temporarily halted until we fully understand the implications." Mason nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Your Honor, I will coordinate with the department, and we need to ensure the child's safety immediately." Ellie whispered again, her tiny voice barely audible. "More toys." The word struck Mason like a physical blow. More toys. Hidden evidence. This child, barely able to speak, was pointing the way to a trove of critical clues that could unravel months of hidden abuse. Helen Carson's tears spilled freely now. "Detective, I think she's trying to help. I think she's trying to show us everything we missed. She remembers more than we ever imagined." Mason felt a cold clarity. The toys weren't just toys. They were carriers of truth, vessels of hidden evidence, and keys to understanding the violent, manipulative environment the child had endured. Judge Rourke leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Detective Hart, you will catalog, secure, and examine every item Ellie has been carrying, and you will report to me directly. This case is far from ordinary. What this child reveals may lead to evidence we've overlooked and possibly prevent further harm." Mason glanced at Coda. The dog's eyes were steady now, calm but vigilant, a sentinel over Ellie and the secret she had carried unknowingly. He realized that the partnership between child and dog was extraordinary, and the only way to uncover the full truth. Ellie's small voice cut through the tension once more. "It's all here." And in that moment, Mason understood. This was not just a custody case anymore. This was a living, breathing puzzle, a dangerous web of secrets that had been hidden in plain sight, and the key had been carried by a 3-year-old child in a simple stuffed animal. The courtroom held its breath. No one could have predicted what would come next, but Mason knew it would change everything, for the child, for the family, and for the law itself. In that moment, the first threads of a story far darker and more intricate than anyone realized began to unravel. The courtroom had become a place of tense anticipation, the air thick with a quiet urgency. Every whisper, every breath seemed amplified. Mason Hart knelt near Ellie, Coda's massive body pressed protectively against his side. The German shepherd's instincts were in overdrive, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring, low growl vibrating like an undercurrent that warned of danger unseen. The small stuffed toy lay in Mason's hands, its fabric worn, faded, innocent to anyone who didn't know better. But Coda's reaction told a very different story. The dog had never responded like this before, not to criminals, not to firearms, not even to aggressive street dogs. This scent, this memory, had triggered something primal in him: recognition. Ellie's tiny fingers twitched, as if urging Mason to look closer. "More," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Mason's pulse quickened. "More what, Ellie?" She pointed at her backpack, the small plush peeking out of it. "All," she said. "All." Coda stiffened. Mason's breath caught. The dog's senses were picking up something hidden, something that should not exist. He sniffed, circling Ellie's belongings, growling low and steady, alert, deliberate. His eyes locked on one particular toy. Mason gently unzipped the backpack and carefully extracted a second stuffed animal. To the casual observer, it was another innocent toy, a soft bear with button eyes, frayed seams, and the faint smell of a child's home. But the moment Coda sniffed it, he froze. Every muscle in his body tensed. His low growl deepened into a warning bark, sharp, insistent, and impossible to ignore. Mason froze. He had trained Coda for years. He knew the difference between a casual alert and a true detection. This was unambiguous. Coda pawed at the bear, whining, circling, nose buried in the seams as though demanding that Mason discover what it was hiding. Mason's hand shook slightly as he gently explored the edges of the toy. There it was again, a hard, almost imperceptible lump. He carefully pressed, feeling the outline of something foreign. Helen Carson gasped, clutching Ellie tighter. "Detective, it belonged to him, the father, she kept it." Mason nodded grimly, understanding. Whatever was inside, it had been hidden there deliberately. And Coda's reaction made it clear. This was not just a toy or a memento. It was evidence. Slowly, Mason unstitched the seam, revealing a small capsule tucked within the bear's stuffing. His heart pounded as he carefully removed it, keeping his hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. He opened the capsule. Inside lay a rolled, stained piece of paper, aged, fragile, and unmistakably written by hand. Mason's eyes widened. He unfolded the note carefully. "If you're reading this, he knows I'm gone. He will look for the evidence. It is hidden in plain sight. Ellie is the only one who carries the key." A low murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Rourke leaned forward, fingers gripping the desk, his piercing eyes narrowing. "Detective Hart, this is extraordinary. Is this admissible?" Mason swallowed hard. "Your Honor, the child has been unknowingly carrying evidence for months. The father, he hid it in plain sight, using her toys. And Coda's reaction confirms that the evidence is significant. He only reacts this way when a scent is associated with trauma, fear, or potential danger." Helen Carson's voice trembled. She's been trying to tell us. I didn't understand. She brushed a curl from Ellie's face, who sat quietly, fingers nervously clutching another stuffed animal peeking from her backpack. Mason's mind raced. One toy, one capsule, one note, how many more were there? And more importantly, what was hidden within them? The child's small voice echoed in his mind. All of it. Judge Rourke's voice cut through the tension, low and commanding. Detective, you will ensure every item this child has carried is carefully examined. Every toy, every belonging must be treated as potential evidence, and ensure the child's safety. Yes, Your Honor, Mason said, swallowing hard. He glanced at Coda. The dog's body remained tense, ears twitching, eyes fixed on Ellie. He was guarding her but also guiding Mason toward the truth. Mason gently moved to the next toy in Ellie's backpack, pulling out a small, patched bunny. Coda immediately reacted, growl low, nose twitching, tail stiff. Mason's pulse hammered in his chest. This was more than coincidence. The father had been meticulous in hiding evidence, but Coda's instincts were uncovering it step by step. Carefully, Mason unstitched the bunny, revealing another capsule. He opened it and found a small flash drive. His stomach tightened. The implications were staggering. He turned to Judge Rourke. Your Honor, this could contain documentation, videos, anything. The mother's note implied she left evidence for authorities to find in case something happened to her. This may be what she was talking about. Judge Rourke's hands tightened around the gavel. Detective, proceed. But this must be handled with the utmost care. We are now dealing with evidence that could implicate multiple parties. Mason nodded, examining the flash drive carefully. Coda, meanwhile, remained alert, sniffing Ellie's remaining toys with precision, growling softly at any that had something unusual about them. The child, still perched on her grandmother's lap, watched silently, her small eyes wide and intense, as though she understood the significance of every movement. Helen Carson whispered, voice trembling. She remembers more than she can say. That night, the father, the dog, she saw everything. I tried to protect her, but her voice broke. Mason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, you've done your best, but this is bigger than any of us imagined. Coda's low growl shifted slightly, a subtle signal Mason had learned to interpret. It wasn't fear, it was alertness combined with recognition. He had detected a scent connected to trauma, and he had now isolated it to specific objects, Ellie's toys. Mason carefully cataloged each toy, every capsule, every note, following Coda's cues. Each discovery added pieces to a puzzle that pointed to a much darker truth than anyone had anticipated. Judge Rourke, watching silently, tapped his gavel lightly. Detective Hart, ensure this evidence is secured immediately, and alert the appropriate units. This child may have unknowingly preserved proof of serious crimes. The father, we must act before anything else happens. Mason nodded, turning to Helen Carson. We need to move quickly. This evidence, this information, it could save lives. The grandmother hugged Ellie tightly. She's scared, Detective. She's been carrying this alone for so long. I didn't know how much. Mason's gaze swept over the child. Her small, trembling fingers clutched another toy, and Coda's ears perked instantly, growl vibrating. Another piece of the puzzle, another secret waiting to emerge. He took a deep breath, carefully approaching Ellie. Ellie, can you help me? Can you show me what's next? The child hesitated, then pointed toward the last stuffed animal in her backpack. Mason froze. Coda's growl intensified, warning him that this toy might contain the most crucial clue of all. Helen Carson whispered, tears streaming down her face. Detective, she's been carrying it this whole time. She's been brave. Mason nodded. Yes, and Coda and I are going to make sure her bravery is not wasted. The courtroom remained silent, all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. Everyone knew, instinctively, that this was more than a custody case. This was the discovery of hidden truths, the unraveling of a nightmare, and the unveiling of a secret that had been concealed in plain sight, guided by a child who had survived the unthinkable. Mason's hand shook slightly as he opened the final toy. Inside, he found a second flash drive and another folded note. The words were even more chilling than the first. "If you are reading this, I am gone. He cannot know you have found it. Protect her. Trust no one else." A hush swept through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, jaw tight. "Detective Hart, this changes everything. Take immediate action and ensure the child is never alone with anyone connected to this father." Mason nodded, swallowing hard. He looked down at Ellie. The child's small voice, trembling but resolute, whispered, "It's all here." And Mason knew with absolute certainty that every instinct, every careful movement, every step he had taken with Coda had led to this point. The hidden evidence, the child's memory, and the dog's instincts had converged into a revelation that would reshape the case and potentially save lives. He glanced at the judge. "Your Honor, we now have what may be the key to unraveling everything, and it all started with 2 words, bad dog." The courtroom fell silent once more, the weight of the revelation pressing down on everyone present. And in that silence, Mason realized the storm had only just begun. The courthouse air had thickened with tension. Mason Hart stood beside Ellie, Coda rigid at his side, growl low and steady. Every muscle in the dog's body was alert, vibrating with the unspoken recognition of danger. The courtroom had gone quiet, almost reverent, as if aware that the events unfolding were far beyond a simple custody dispute. The flash drives and notes were secured in Mason's jacket pocket, and the stuffed toys were carefully laid on a table in front of the judge. Each one was a silent testimony, carrying the weight of hidden memories and evidence. Ellie sat quietly on her grandmother's lap, small hands clutching the last toy, eyes wide and alert, sensing the significance of each movement. Judge Rourke's gaze was sharp. "Detective Hart, this evidence points to criminal behavior, not just neglect. Do you have any indication of the father's involvement beyond threats or intimidation?" Mason nodded slowly. "Your Honor, based on Coda's reaction and the child's memories, the father was not just negligent. He was actively concealing evidence and potentially endangering the child. The toys were clearly used as a method to hide proof of something he knew authorities might look for. That, combined with Ellie's reactions, suggests he was aware of the mother's disappearance and possibly had a direct role in it." Helen Carson gasped, clinging to her granddaughter. I knew he was controlling, but I never imagined this." Mason exhaled slowly, trying to keep his own emotions in check. Years on the force had taught him to compartmentalize, but this was different. He could feel the child's terror, the invisible thread of memory that had haunted her for months. And Coda, the dog's low growl and intense focus confirmed Mason's worst fears. The father's secret was more than intimidation. It was danger, alive and present. The judge leaned forward. "Detective, do you believe the father has hidden other evidence? Could there be more physical evidence, digital records, anything that hasn't been discovered?" Mason's jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Honor, and Coda is already indicating it. He's reacting to specific scents tied to trauma, danger, and fear. The child has unknowingly led us to it. But if we delay, we risk losing crucial evidence, or worse, allowing the father to act before authorities can intervene." Judge Rourke's expression hardened. "Then we proceed immediately. Detective Hart, you will coordinate with law enforcement to locate the father and secure any additional evidence. The child's safety is paramount." And he glanced at Helen Carson and Ellie. "You will not be left alone with him under any circumstances." Helen nodded quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. We understand, Your Honor." Mason knelt beside Ellie, keeping his voice low. "Ellie, we need to find the rest. Can you show me where he put it?" The child hesitated, glancing nervously at her grandmother, then at Coda. She pressed a small hand to her chest and whispered, Basement." Mason's pulse quickened. "Basement, are you sure, Ellie?" She nodded vigorously, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Downstairs, scary bad dog." Coda's growl deepened, low and guttural. Mason felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a memory. Coda's reaction made it clear. Whatever awaited them in that basement, it was tied to Ellie's trauma and the father's criminal activity. And it was real. Judge Rourke tapped his gavel lightly, signaling urgency. "Detective Hart, coordinate with law enforcement immediately. This may require a search warrant, but based on the child's statements and the corroborating evidence from the toys, I authorize you to proceed." Mason nodded, exchanging a quick glance with Coda. The dog's ears twitched, tail stiff, muscles coiled like a spring. Mason whispered almost to himself, "Stay close, buddy, we're going in." Outside the courtroom, Mason coordinated with officers waiting in the hallway. They moved quickly but quietly, avoiding drawing attention from the crowd lingering in the courthouse lobby. Ellie clutched her grandmother's hand tightly, small body trembling, but her eyes never left Coda. It was as if the child understood that the dog and Mason were the only shields between her and the unseen danger her memory hinted at. When they arrived at the father's residence, a modest suburban home with peeling paint and an overgrown yard, Mason felt the tension ratchet higher. Every instinct screamed that the father knew something had been uncovered. The front door was unlocked, careless or intentional, Mason couldn't tell, but Coda immediately signaled alertness, nostrils flaring, muscles tensed. Mason gestured for Ellie and Helen to remain behind the police barricade at the edge of the driveway. "Stay close. I won't be long," he said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Inside, the house was dim, the air stale and heavy. Mason flicked on his flashlight, Coda at his side, growling softly as they moved from room to room. Dust motes floated in the narrow beam of light, but every corner, every shadow, seemed to carry an invisible weight. The basement door loomed at the far end of the hallway. Mason could feel Coda's tension spike, muscles rigid, nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The dog's behavior left no doubt. Whatever Ellie had remembered, whatever fear she had carried, was down there. Mason descended the creaking stairs slowly, flashlight cutting a path through the darkness. Coda padded silently behind him, eyes sharp, ears twitching. The air was damp and cold, carrying a faint but unmistakable scent of old chemicals and decay. Mason's stomach tightened. Then Coda froze mid-step, hackles raised, ears flat. Mason's breath caught. The dog's growl was low but insistent, vibrating with the certainty of danger. Mason followed the line of sight and saw it. A small, locked chest tucked into the corner of the basement. Dust covered the surface, but the handle was worn, frequently used. Mason's pulse raced. Coda sniffed the chest repeatedly, pawing at the floor with increasing urgency. Mason knelt, carefully examining the lock. It was simple enough to pick with his tools, but the anticipation, the dread, made his hands shake slightly. Click, the lock gave way. Mason lifted the lid slowly. Inside were folders, papers, photographs, and a small digital device. The smell of mildew and chemicals hit him instantly, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the contents, evidence meticulously hidden by a father who had believed his crimes would remain buried. Mason pulled out a folder and saw photos. A child, Ellie, being terrorized by a large dog, snapshots taken in secret, documenting abuse. His stomach twisted. This was proof of months of manipulation, fear, and danger, the very memories Ellie had carried silently. Then he spotted the digital device. He powered it on and files opened. Videos, recordings, even messages from the mother, documenting threats, the father's controlling behavior, and hints of her disappearance. Mason felt a chill run through him. The mother's warnings had not been in vain. Coda circled the room, sniffing every corner, low growl continuing, as if confirming Mason's discoveries. Every toy Ellie had carried, every note, every capsule had been a breadcrumb leading to this basement. Mason felt a surge of anger but also awe at the child's resilience. She had survived, hidden evidence and guided them, unintentionally but unmistakably, to the truth. Suddenly a noise upstairs. A door creaking made Coda stiffen, hackles raised, teeth bared. Mason froze. Someone was home, someone dangerous. And Mason's instincts told him immediately the father was returning. He whispered into his radio, voice taut with urgency. "Officer, suspect may be returning. Basement secured. Prepare to intercept." Coda's growl intensified. His body coiled like a spring. Mason realized that the child's memories, the hidden toys, and the dog's instincts had uncovered the father's secret. But now they had drawn the attention of someone who would stop at nothing to prevent the truth from surfacing. Mason's heart pounded. Ellie's trauma, Coda's instincts, the hidden evidence, it all converged in this dark basement. And now, the final confrontation, the reveal of the father's true nature, was about to begin. Outside, Helen Carson clutched Ellie tightly, whispering reassurances she didn't quite believe. And Mason, flashlight in hand, Coda beside him, knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was far from over. The storm had arrived. And in the shadows of that basement, the father's secret waited, ready to surface in ways no one could yet anticipate. Mason Hart crouched in the dimly lit basement, Coda pressed against his side, ears twitching, tail rigid. The air was thick with the scent of dust, mildew, and something metallic that made Mason's stomach tighten. He had cataloged the evidence, the folders, the photos, the flash drives, all proof of the father's manipulation, coercion, and likely abuse. Coda growled low, rumbling through the floorboards. Every instinct Mason had honed over years of law enforcement screamed. Someone was approaching. The creak of a floorboard upstairs confirmed it. Mason whispered into his radio, keeping his voice low. "Team, suspect is inside. I repeat, suspect is inside. Back up, move carefully, he may be armed." A shadow passed over the basement stairs. Mason tensed. Coda's growl deepened, a warning that cut through the stale air like a blade. Mason peered upward, heart hammering, and saw the door at the top of the stairs slowly begin to open. A figure appeared, tall, imposing, face twisted with suspicion and anger. The father. "Detective Hart," he said, voice low, dripping with menace. "I don't know what you think you're doing down there, but you've crossed a line." Mason rose slowly, keeping hands visible, one hand resting near the evidence folder. "Your line was crossed the moment you endangered a child. Now it's over. Step back or Coda and I will take control." The father's eyes flicked to the dog, narrowing. Coda's growl deepened, low and threatening, hackles raised. Mason could feel the tension vibrating through the basement walls, thick as smoke. The father hesitated, sensing the danger, yet something in him refused to yield. "You don't understand," the father snapped, voice rising. "I did what I had to do. She's my daughter." Mason's jaw tightened. "No, you endangered her. You manipulated her, hid evidence in her toys, and tried to cover up threats. She survived in spite of you, not because of you." The father stepped closer, and Mason could smell the cheap cologne masking fear and anger. "You think you know the whole story," he spat. "You have no idea. I'm the only one who kept her safe." Coda bared his teeth, growl now a low, continuous rumble. Mason could see the child's trauma reflected in the dog's reaction, a combination of recognition and instinctive protection. The father's stance shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. Mason spoke slowly, deliberately, voice steady. "You're not in control anymore. The toys, the notes, the flash drives, they tell a story you can't erase. Ellie has carried the truth with her. She survived. And Coda can sense danger in ways you'll never understand. Step back." The father's anger spiked. He lunged toward Mason, hands outstretched. Coda reacted instantly, moving between Mason and the father, teeth bared, a warning growl so low and fierce it vibrated through the concrete floor. Mason barely managed to hold the father back, grabbing him by the shoulders. "Stop," Mason shouted, heart racing. "Coda, control." The father froze, eyes wide, sweat beading on his forehead. The dog's presence was magnetic, dominating, a force that refused to be challenged. Mason felt the air thickening, the tension crackling. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a battle for control, for survival. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the stairs behind them. Ellie's small voice, trembling but resolute. "Daddy, stop." The father turned sharply. Mason saw it then, panic in his eyes, the first crack in his carefully constructed mask. Ellie stepped forward from the top of the stairs, her grandmother holding her close, tiny hands shaking but voice firm. "You hurt me," she said, voice quivering but clear. "And you tried to hide everything, the toys, the notes, I know." Mason watched in awe as the child, barely 3, stood her ground. Coda growled low, keeping the father at bay, yet the dog's focus seemed attuned to the child's fear and courage simultaneously. The balance in the room shifted. It was no longer just Mason versus the father. Ellie's presence, her fragmented but unwavering memory, was a powerful force. The father's hands trembled. I only wanted to protect you," he stammered, voice breaking. I didn't mean." Mason's gaze sharpened. "You endangered her, you manipulated her, and you tried to hide your crimes. That's not protection, it's abuse, and the authorities will hold you accountable." Coda's growl deepened, now more of a warning than an immediate threat, as if communicating to Mason and Ellie. "Stay alert." The father was cornered but dangerous, and the dog's instincts were a shield, a line no one could cross without consequence. The father slumped slightly, defeated, hands dropping to his sides. Mason sensed the subtle shift. He wasn't violent yet, but the desperation and fear made him unpredictable. Ellie's small voice pierced the tense silence again. "Detective, the rest is in the garage." Mason froze. He glanced at Coda, who stiffened, nostrils flaring. The dog's body was a living sensor, alerting him to danger the father might have prepared. The basement had revealed evidence, yes, but the garage could contain more. Physical items, records, proof of the father's actions. Mason spoke softly to Ellie, kneeling beside her. "You're doing great. Can you help me show us what's next?" She nodded, trembling but steady. "Follow me but scary." Helen Carson wrapped an arm around her granddaughter. "We'll be right behind you," she whispered, voice shaking. "You're so brave, Ellie." Mason led the father upstairs under watchful eyes, ensuring Coda's presence kept him in line. The child and her grandmother followed, the dog guarding, muscles coiled like springs. Every step toward the garage was tense, deliberate. Mason could feel the father's fear mingling with his own adrenaline, thickening the air. The garage door loomed large, shadows spilling across the concrete floor. Mason signaled to Coda, who padded silently, nose twitching, scanning the air. The scent of old chemicals, metal, and something distinctly human intensified. Whatever was hidden here, it was dangerous, but Coda's instincts guided Mason. Mason approached a stack of crates in the corner. Coda sniffed, growled low, pawing at the base. Mason knelt, carefully opening the first crate. Inside, files, boxes, photographs, evidence meticulously catalogued by the father, hidden under the guise of mundane storage. The child stepped closer, small fingers pointing at another crate. Mason opened it carefully, heart pounding. Inside were more toys, capsules, notes, proof of manipulation, evidence of threats, and signs that the father had been trying to erase his crimes. Mason glanced at Coda. The dog's stance remained tense, yet reassuring, signaling that this was the culmination of the child's guidance, her memories, and the dog's instincts. The puzzle pieces were coming together, but the father's presence remained a threat. Suddenly, the father lunged again, desperate, eyes wild. Coda reacted instantly, positioning himself between Mason and the father, hackles raised, teeth bared. Mason restrained the father, voice sharp. "Step back now." The father froze, breathing ragged, realizing the child, the evidence, and Coda's presence left him no leverage. Mason handcuffed him swiftly, reading the tension in his body, the fear in his eyes, and the defeat in his posture. Ellie watched silently, trembling but composed. Her trauma, her courage, and the evidence she had unknowingly carried had led them here. Mason felt a mix of relief and awe. Her bravery, combined with Koda's instincts, had confronted the father and secured the path to justice. Judge Rourke's words echoed in Mason's mind. The storm had only begun. But in this garage, in this moment, the first true victory had been won. The father's secret had emerged, laid bare before law enforcement, the child and the dog who had guided them. Koda's growl softened, shifting to a low, steady watch. Mason looked at the child. "You did it, Ellie. You helped us find the truth." Ellie's small voice whispered, trembling but proud, "It's all safe now." Mason smiled faintly, chest tight with emotion. "Yes, for now, but we have more work to do." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the driveway. Mason knew this was not the end. But for the first time, he felt a sense of hope. The child's memory, the hidden evidence, and a dog's unwavering instincts had combined to reveal the truth. And the father, cornered, powerless, exposed. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, justice had a chance to catch up. The garage was silent, except for the faint hum of Mason's flashlight and Koda's low, steady breathing. The father, handcuffed and under careful watch by officers, sat slumped against the wall, the weight of exposure pressing down on him. His eyes flicked nervously from Mason to the child, then to the crates of evidence that had been unearthed. Ellie remained close to her grandmother, small hands clutching Koda's fur as though drawing courage from the dog's calm, unwavering presence. The child's wide eyes darted to every folder, every toy, every capsule. She had guided them here, unknowingly but deliberately, carrying the truth for months in the toys she had never let go of. Mason knelt beside her, keeping his voice soft and gentle. "Ellie, can you show me what happened? Start from the beginning, take your time. No one will rush you." The child hesitated, lips trembling. But then she began, her tiny voice quiet at first but gaining strength with each word. The bad dog, he wasn't real," she whispered. "It was Daddy's dog, scary, he hurt Mommy, I saw, Mommy hid things. I had the toys, Daddy didn't see." Mason felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were fitting together. The mother's disappearance, the hidden capsules in the toys, the child's fragmented memories, Koda's instincts, they had all led to this revelation. Judge Rourke's words echoed in his mind. This child may have unknowingly preserved proof of serious crimes. And now the truth was emerging, step by painstaking step. Ellie's voice grew steadier. "Mommy," she said, "if Daddy finds the things bad, very bad, I kept them. I didn't know why, but Koda helped." Mason glanced down at the dog. Koda sat alert but calm, eyes fixed on the child as though acknowledging her courage. Mason swallowed hard. This dog had not only detected danger, it had protected Ellie, guided Mason to the evidence, and now stood witness to the child's own testimony. Helen Carson's tears fell freely. She carried this all alone, all this time. Mason turned to the father, whose face had gone pale. "Do you hear that?" Mason said, voice low but firm. "This child has been telling us what you tried to hide. Every toy, every note, every secret you thought you buried has been uncovered. You are not in control anymore." The father's lips trembled. I only wanted to protect her." Mason shook his head. "Protect? No, you manipulated, you threatened, and you endangered, and now the truth is out. Law enforcement has it all." Officers carefully moved forward, escorting him toward a waiting police vehicle. His eyes flicked one last time to Ellie. For a fleeting moment he looked human, broken, desperate, terrified. Then the moment passed, leaving only the man who had hidden evidence, manipulated a child, and tried to control a life with fear. Mason remained beside Ellie, letting her small body shake against him and Koda. "It's okay now," he whispered. "You're safe. You helped us find the truth. No one can hurt you like that again." Ellie's tiny arms tightened around him. "The toys, they're safe now." "They're safe," Mason reassured her. "And we'll make sure the authorities know everything you carried, everything you remembered." Helen Carson crouched beside her granddaughter, brushing a curl from her forehead. "You were so brave," she whispered. "We're so proud of you." Ellie's small voice, still trembling, whispered one final thought. "Mommy will be safe now." Mason's eyes softened. "Yes, your mom will be found and she'll be safe, and no one will hide the truth again." Back at the courthouse, the evidence was cataloged meticulously. Flash drives, capsules, toys, all were documented, logged, and secured. The father's attempts to cover his tracks had been thorough, but Ellie's courage and Coda's instincts had revealed everything. Judge Rourke presided over the follow-up hearing. He addressed the courtroom solemnly, voice carrying the weight of justice and recognition of extraordinary courage. "This case demonstrates the resilience of a child, the extraordinary instincts of a service animal, and the diligence of law enforcement. The child has provided evidence that may not only bring justice for her family but prevent harm to others in the future. We acknowledge the bravery of the young witness, the dedication of Detective Hart, and the service of Coda in uncovering the truth." Mason watched as Ellie clutched Coda's paw, small hands wrapped around the fur, eyes wide with cautious relief. Her trauma was not erased, but it had been validated, acknowledged, and finally connected to action. Months later, the mother was located. Hidden and terrified, she had survived thanks to the careful documentation she had left behind, knowing her child might one day reveal the truth. Reunited with Ellie and Helen, she wept openly, holding her daughter as though never letting go. The father was incarcerated, facing multiple charges: child endangerment, manipulation, and concealment of evidence, among others. Mason stood nearby, observing the reunion, Coda sitting alertly beside him. The dog had guided them through months of uncertainty, instinctively sensing danger, fear, and the path to the hidden truth. The partnership had saved a child, uncovered crimes, and ultimately ensured justice. Ellie, small but resilient, finally smiled. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Coda, good dog." Mason's lips curled into a small, proud smile. "The best," he said. As the family hugged, Mason realized the magnitude of what had been accomplished. A 3-year-old's memory, fragmented yet persistent, a police dog's instincts, sharp and unerring, and careful, patient investigation had combined to bring truth from the shadows. The child had survived fear, trauma, and manipulation, emerging stronger and braver than anyone had anticipated. Coda's tail wagged once, then settled, eyes steady and calm as though satisfied that his work was complete. Mason knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "You did it, boy," he murmured. "We did it together." Ellie's mother, still holding her daughter, looked up at Mason, gratitude shining in her tear-filled eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You and him," she gestured toward Coda, "saved our family." Mason nodded, emotion tight in his chest. "No," he said gently. "Ellie saved herself. We just followed her lead and trusted Coda's instincts." The sunlight fell through the courthouse windows, warm and golden, casting long shadows that intertwined like threads of a story finally revealed. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. And the bond between a child, a police dog, and a dedicated detective had proven that even the smallest voice, the quietest memory, and the keenest instincts could change the course of a life. Ellie's laughter rang softly as she ran her fingers through Coda's fur. Her mother held her close, Helen beside them, and Mason watched from a distance, the weight of relief settling into his chest. Some stories end quietly. This one ended with justice, courage, and a truth that could no longer be hidden. And for Ellie, it was only the beginning of a life rebuilt, safe at last.